Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 125. In today's episode, we're going to start a little journey on confined space entry. We'll have completely separate episodes on all the duties, atmospheric monitoring, the rescue portion, all that good stuff then. So I'm going to keep these very specific. Um, these next few very specific for the individual action only, and then at the end we'll kind of wrap up and bring the whole thing together. Let's get started on today's episode: attendant duties. So a lot of the things I'm going to take from today's episode is straight from 29 CFR 146, the permit required confined spaces. And what we're going to do in this episode is talk about the attendant duties only. And what we're going to do is really sit down and say we have a permit required confined space. We're not going to go through any of the actions to make it a non-permit required, but we're saying that it's a permit required confined space. So, in a nutshell, there's going to be three separate duties. You have the attendant, who is a person who tends the confined space, the entrant, the person who goes in, and then you also have the entry supervisor then. So, the entry supervisor can also be the attendant. But today we'll talk about the attendant only. Let's just do a 100% definition right from the CFR and then get started. So, attendant means a individual stationed outside one or more permit spaces who monitors the authorized entrance and who performs all attendance duties assigned in the employer's permit space program. Whoa, that's a mouthful. So basically, they're saying when you set up your confined space entry program, the attendant will do the following things. And some of the things are very dependent upon the confined space, whereas some are going to apply to all of them out there. So let's go over a definition of a confined space. Large enough and so configured that a employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work, has limited or restricted means for entry or exit. And when we think about the examples, tanks and vessels and silos and storage bins and hoppers and all that good stuff then, and it is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. So those are the definitions of a confined space. So now let's look at the attendant duties. So the attendant knows the hazards that may be faced during the entry. So when we think about that, there's going to be the atmospheric monitoring. There could also be the hazard of just literally getting into the space itself. You could be coming down a sewer, so you need to kind of figure out, I set up my tripod, I lower the person down. So they have to know all of the different hazards out there. Is aware of possible behavioral effects of hazard exposure in authorized entrance. So if there's any chemical exposure out there, just to know the signs and symptoms of that chemical exposure. So I have not heard of anybody getting all the way into a confined space and then realizing they have claustrophobia. I had thought that potentially that's something that's out there, but I have not discovered that yet. Another thing that a attendant will do is continually maintain a accurate count of the entrance inside the space. Then, and we'll also get into lockout, tagout, and a lot of that stuff a little bit further on. But you obviously wouldn't want to send in three, and when two of them come out, you lost count and put the hatch back on. You know. Some more duties remains outside the space during entry operations until relieved by another attendant. So basically, you can't wander off. You can't just run to the bathroom. Um, don't look down at your phone. Screw around on your phone. Um, those kinds of things. So you're going to be attendant and ready to go. And there's a note in here too that if the employer's permit entry program allows for the attendant to be part of the rescue, they have to then wait for attendant to come and all that kind of stuff, and then they can go in and help out with the rescue. They also must communicate with the entrants as necessary to monitor their status and then alert them whenever they have to evacuate that space. Could be that as you start the process, everything's good. You've done all your atmospheric monitoring, everything's good. As the person is inside of whatever the confined space is, now let's say they've stirred up or generated um, some some chemicals and stirred it up, kind of a deal. And now you have a situation that you do not have a safe atmosphere. You warn the people, you get them out, all that good stuff. Also, if you're watching the person, you may see something that they don't see. If they have to go in with some form of PPE, a respirator, kind of something, then you still don't have that real good visual. You just don't see as well when you start to put on different things. Sometimes it's dark, all that good stuff. Some more duties then. So you're going to look for that prohibited condition. You're also going to look for those behavioral effects too then. So that's been noticed. I mean, not been noticed, but that's been said twice in our duties then. So um, most of my confined space has been in the with the chemical industry, but most of mine were corrosive chemicals. A lot of the solvents out there can have that narcotic effect in, and that could definitely have a behavioral effect. Also, you will tell the person if you detect a situation outside the space that could endanger the entrant. The only thing that I could think of is that if there was something else at the plant happening, chemical leak, a fire, gas leak. Um, Maybe you're dependent upon forced air to get in, and the weather has changed, and now you're just uh, not able to run that motor to get that forced air in there. Just something that's changed on the outside that's going to affect the person inside the confined space. Then, so uh, summon rescue and emergency services then. So, and of course, we're going to do a whole survey on that. It's very situation dependent upon what's happening. Takes the following actions when somebody approaches a confined space. Um, you warn the unauthorized person that they must stay away from the space. Then you advise them that they must exit the space if they have entered the permit space, and you inform the authorized entrance and entry supervisor if unauthorized persons have entered the permit space. Um, I get it that you have to have this down as a duty, but all the permit spaces that I was at, even I didn't want to go in. So I just can't picture somebody who just happens to want to go in and do these things. I can understand if it's part of the rescue, but they're making it sound like somebody will just approach and enter. And the attendant will perform non-entry rescues as specified by the employer's rescue procedure, and finally performs no other duties that might interfere with the attendant's job to monitor and to protect the authorized entrance. Um, so this is really important for the attendant to stay focused, to stay there, um, because let's face it, the one who's really doing the work is the entrant. The attendant is really just there to monitor the situation. Super, super important. Um, but some people view that as a job that anybody can do, and then they just end up sticking anybody there that they think can do that then. So still have to be trained. You still have to know the different procedures. Um, and if you're part of a crew that maybe does maintenance at several chemical plants or other places, then you would have to understand um, whatever the home company will say, whatever their program is. What do they do for confined space? How do they call for the rescue? And just really understand the details since you'll be traveling from site to site out there. And that's it for today's episode, episode number 125. This is where we talked about the attendant duties only. We're going to have a lot more in this series. I do think that confined space entry is challenging to pull it off completely right. Um, because it's really hard. You really got to go there early. You survey the site, you figure out exactly what has to be done, you ventilate the space, all that good stuff then. And sometimes we're depending on people on the shift prior to us. So it really takes a lot of communication out there to pull this thing off. So episode number 125 is complete. Thank you for joining me. My name is Dr. David Ayers. Thank you and have a safe day.